Fair as it might be, a country of righteousness.
Although the government has been missing its revenue targets for the past 3 years, the targets put forward by the finance minister are higher compared to those set for 2018 and 2019. Mr. Ofori-Atta is, however, confident that the NPP administration should be able to sail through even though they face a risk of overspending, with next year being an election year.
Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants for 2020 is projected at 67.1 billion, 16.9% of GDP, up from a projected outturn for 2019 of 54.6 billion, 15.8% of GDP. Domestic revenue is estimated at 65.8 billion, representing an annual growth of 22.5% over the projected outturn for 2019. Grants disbursements from development partners is estimated at 1.2 billion, 0.3% of GDP, and a nominal growth of 48.8% over the projected outturn of 833.2 million in 2019. Mr. Speaker, total expenditures, including clearance of arrears, is projected at 85.9 billion, 21.6% of GDP in 2020. The expenditure estimate for 2020 represents a growth of 21.2% above the projected outturn for 2019. Mr. Speaker, wages and salaries are projected at 22.9 billion and constitute 26.7% of the total expenditure, including arrears clearance. Use of goods and services is also projected at 8.3 billion, 2.1% of GDP, and 9.7% of the total expenditure, including arrears clearance. Interest payments on public debt is projected at 21.7 billion, 5.4% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, government will continue with the implementation of the Earmark Funds Capping and Realignment Act to reduce budget rigidities and create the needed fiscal space to fund growth-enhancing expenditures. Consequently, transfers to treasury funds as well as all other earmark funds are estimated at 15.6 billion, 3.9% of GDP in 2020, representing 19.6% growth over the projected outturn for 2019. Mr. Speaker, capital expenditure is projected at 9.3 billion, 2.3% of GDP, representing 53.5% increase over the 2019 projected outturn. Of this amount, domestic finance capital expenditure is estimated at 3.8 billion, 0.9% of GDP, while foreign finance capital expenditure is estimated at 5.5 billion, 1.4% of GDP, to be funded by a combination of project grants and loans. Budget balances and financial operations for 2020. Mr. Speaker, based on the estimates for total revenue and grants and total expenditure, the 2020 fiscal operations will result in a cash deficit of 18.9 billion, equivalent to 4.7% of.
The issue of revenue shortfall has been a major challenge for the NPP administration. At least for the past 3 years in office, there has been an accumulated 3 billion cedis gap in projected revenue target, which were expected to be collected by the GRA alone. It is against this backdrop that Ken Ofori-Atta has announced the extension of the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy as well as the Special Import Levy by 5 more years. This is in spite of the sunset clause, which means that the levy should have been stopped after a certain period of time.
Government will pursue the following revenue measures, among others, to boost domestic revenue. Government shall renew and extend the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy and Special Import Levies for 5 years to support the budget. In line of government policy, the personal income tax band will be adjusted and the necessary parliamentary approval sought to ensure that a 12% minimum wage increase for 2020 is tax exempt.
Meanwhile, the government has justified its decision to allow the regulators of Ghana's financial sector to undertake major reforms over the past 2 years. The Bank of Ghana's reform has seen the revocation of licenses of 9 indigenous banks and over 300 other financial institutions. Also, the recent crackdown by the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) has led to the revocation of licenses of 53 fund management companies.
These interventions were timely to ensure that we safeguard the financial system, provided relief to many families and businesses, as well as to protect jobs, local interests in the financial system. Mr. Speaker, it is important to state that government has not under any circumstances intentionally collapsed any financial institution. These institutions, Mr. Speaker, were insolvent and or distressed as a result of their own actions, and their respective regulators stepped in to intervene and to save over 4 million depositors and investors. Our commitment, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that we provide relief to many of the victims. The total estimated call for a fiscal intervention, excluding interest payments from 2017 to 2019, is estimated at 16.4 billion Ghana cedis.